This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I am here with one of my favorite people in Ontario, Mr. Steve Beauchesne, who is joining us all the way from Vankleek Hill in Ontario. How are you today, sir?
I'm great, Jamie. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm getting through everything that's going on right now, and have been enjoying your beers. And I thought of no one better to call up and probe their mind than yourself. How are you doing today?
You know what? It's hard to say I'm doing great, but I think there's a new sense of what great feels like, and I'm healthy, and well, I've learned that beer does pair well with apocalypses,
Oh,
so that's always good to know. It's you know what? Cheers. This is just releasing this week, by the way. So
all right. You can tell me
secret
more
beer for
about that
me.
in a second.
Secret beer for me. You know what? It's hard to complain when you know that there are people in the healthcare industry that are putting their lives at risk every day, and you know that there are people that are in dire situation right now across the world. But it's not without challenge, and a lot of our business is reliant on the bar and restaurant industry, so they've obviously been decimated, and it's hard for me to feel like I can complain about us losing that business when most restaurants and bars have lost their entire business through
Yeah.
this. So uh, I feel in the grand scheme that we're doing better than most, but it's challenging times. It's difficult emotionally, and it's difficult financially for the brewery. And I think the big thing for us is just we've got to make sure that we stay safe and we get through it.
So, what would you say the greatest impacts have been? I mean, you mentioned, of course, with all these restaurants and bars closing, but what kind of impacts has it had for you within the company? Shall we say, even the process of making the beer, for example?
Mhm. Well, the first and biggest priority through this has been keeping our staff and our customers safe.
Right.
So it's been a huge piece of work to identify where the risks are and identify how to prevent them. I think we were probably the first brewery in the country to close our shop down. By Friday the 13th of all days,
Yeah.
we were shut, and closed our doors to the public right away. If you've ever been to the brewery, it's a fairly open space, and we just thought that the risk both to our customers as well as our staff was just too high. And from there, we had to look at the interactions that we were asking our staff to have with the public. We had to look at you know um, inside the brewery, we talk about personal protective equipment. We call it PPEs, but suddenly we're thinking, well, drivers now need personal protective equipment,
Of course, yes.
gloves and sprays and masks, and you think of all the things that you know 3-4 weeks ago we weren't considering. We've had to develop policies, for everything out of the blue, and that's been tough. On an emotional perspective, um, it's been very difficult. We have not been able to keep our entire workforce on. In fact, we're more than 50% of the workforce is now on temporary layoff.
Right. Right.
And as a friends and family company, that's taking just as much of a toll on those of us uh, that are on one side as it is on the other. And it's hard when you see people you care about deeply who are temporarily laid off. and trying to make sure that they're staying safe and they're staying not just physically healthy but emotionally healthy as well. Then there's I think sort of a the factor of how can we be a force for good out of this? How can we be contributing positively to our community during this time? That's obviously a big challenge that we're working hard to find solutions to. And then I guess the other big challenge is financially as a business, how do we make sure that we're still around and we survive as a company through this crisis as well, because we want to make sure that we get to the other side, and that's it's a big balance trying to make sure that you're doing all of those things, but we've been trying as much as possible to prioritize health and safety of our fans and our employees as the number one thing, and then probably the ongoing success of Beau's as a force for good as the second thing, and then everything else is kind of you're trying to juggle it all at the same time.
Right. Now, with so much of your business being on-premise bars and restaurants, how have you managed to pivot that onto the online ordering? I actually ordered some stuff online. It took a few days to get here, but that's why I'm enjoying this full-time IPA today. And that worked out pretty well, I have to say. I mean, the whole system is so clogged up right now, all of the delivery services and the like. But it did get here. It took a few days, but I wasn't desperate for it. How have you managed to pivot that? And how much have your online sales increased?
Well, until the crisis, we weren't really selling beer online, so I guess it's infinity increase.
Okay.
And that's turned into a nice bit of extra business. We've also had to pivot multiple times with restaurant and with LCBO.
Right.
LCBO's changed their protocol several times, from reducing hours to closing on Mondays. They stopped allowing sales reps visiting, and they stopped allowing sales reps even phoning. Lots of changes that we've had to pivot there. With the restaurant industry, first they were closed, then they were allowed to deliver beer. So we're trying to work with our restaurant partners that are trying to make a go of it with delivery and takeout alcohol. So we're trying our best to support them. And so it almost feels like every day we come up with a plan, and then by noon there's an announcement made and we have to change the plan.
Yeah.
And then we make a new plan, and then the next day we do it all again. And if it wasn't for how scary this all is, it would actually be kind of fun. If you could kind of like every day, oh, we're a brand new business, let's rediscover ourselves from scratch. But it's been a real eye-opener in terms of the amount of opportunities that we've not necessarily been pursuing, because when you're constantly just trying to feed the engine that already exists, you take a much different approach to innovation and new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. This crisis has just thrown everything out the window, and we get to reinvent ourselves every day. And I wish it wasn't under these circumstances, but there is a real silver lining to this for that.
Have you run into any issues when it comes to logistics, such as supply of glass, canning materials, barley, hops, and the like?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things we did in our kind of emergency preparedness was contacted each of our suppliers that was crucial to our business and came up with a contingency plan for each of them.
Right.
Knock on wood, we've done a pretty good job so far of maintaining good supply, and we haven't encountered any critical stoppages. Some things have been delayed. Some things we're ordering more of than we ordinarily would. And other things, I think for me, the real challenge for supply chain is going to be when they make the announcement that the world's turned back on, because then everybody's going to be out of everything and no one will have prepared.
Yes, yeah.
So, and it's impossible really to prepare because none of us know when the world goes back to normal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the big thing we're trying to figure out now, because we got through sort of the initial, oh shit, the world's in crisis, and now we're trying to think, well, how are we going to come back when the world gets back to normal?
Normal, yeah, the new normal.
Yeah.
So, how has all of this impacted you personally? Aside from the everything going on within Bowls the brewery, but Steve Beauchesne, what's been going on with you and your family?
Well, there's been, I guess, a lot of adjustments that we've had to make, same as everybody else. My two daughters were out of country when the pandemic got announced, and so they were successful in getting back into the country, which I'm quite thankful for. But then they had to quarantine afterwards, so I had to go 3 weeks without seeing my kids, and that was pretty tough. But on the flip side, my partner Karina is pregnant, and we just found out we're having a baby girl. So we've had a lot to celebrate as well. Obviously, under very different circumstances. It was kind of weird not being able to go with Karina on the ultrasound, for example.
Wow. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So we just made adjustments. The ultrasound technician wrote on a little sheet of paper, and Karina didn't look until she came out to the car. So we got to share the moment together, and I think that's the big thing that we've been trying to do as a family is, when the kids were in quarantine, we learned how to play online games, and for Easter, we got the family on a teleconference, and I guess video conference you call them now. Sound like an old man here.
Sound like a boomer.
We got on the party line.
Okay.
So it was, it's been a lot of adjustment, and in a very short time, but it's not been all bad. One of the things that I'm finding incredible is, I think with so much less pollution, I can see all the way to Vermont from my house now.
Well,
and I'm amazed at how much better the air smells and things like that. And it could be that I just wasn't paying attention because I was always off and doing things before, or it could be that the lack of pollution going on is actually that quick to make a noticeable impact.
You mentioned that new brew that you had there. What is that one?
Yeah, so this is a amber lagered ale. So obviously our Lug Tread is the first ever lagered ale, or at least beer called one. And so we decided to really lean in on it. Country Vibes is an amber lagered ale. So same kind of process of taking an ale, fermenting a beer like an ale, so you get that extra kind of fruity flavor, and then aging it like a lager, so you get that really crisp finish and that kind of lager-like refreshing quality to a beer. But this one uses a lot more Vienna malts and kind of caramel malts, so you get just a different malt backbone to it, a little bit sweeter, but balanced off with a little bit more hops, and makes for a really tasty beer. And the other kind of fun thing with this, Beau's has always enjoyed zagging when the rest of the world zigs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
much like yourself.
Exactly. So all the world reports at sort of the 2020 start of the year were saying, amber ales were passe, and they were so far from cool that no one was doing them anymore. And we said, oh, perfect, that's the perfect time for us to start. And I really feel like for such a staple beer, it's very hard to find a new release that fits in an amber category, whether it's an ale or a lager. And the kind of amber lagered ale is really something special, because you get the best of both worlds, and you get something that's a bit darker, a bit maltier than kind of a lug tread beer. So
I hear you.
Fun.
Now, you also mentioned that your drinking habits had changed somewhat.
Yeah, we were joking before the interview. I know you're familiar with our full-time IPA, because I think you're drinking that right now. So that's our 6% big bold IPA, and we also have a session IPA, which is flavor-wise bold, but only 4%. And I was saying before the crisis, I was drinking a lot more good time IPA than I was full time IPA. Since the crisis, I've been drinking a lot more full time IPA than good time IPA. And I'm not sure if that's because I'm looking for a little bit of extra comfort, or if it's because I never have to drive anywhere.
Right. Oh, yeah, actually, good call. Well, I remember just before the crisis, everyone was talking about people going towards the non-alcoholic stuff or the lower alcohol beers, and I've done some exploration into that, and I wonder how that's playing out right now.
I'm really curious to see if the trend of low alcohol survives the pandemic, or if that's going to be one of the things that goes away. And the idea of the healthy lifestyle, and drinking less alcohol, I'm assuming is going to be an ongoing thing. But the idea of a low alcoholic beverage may not survive the crisis, because I think a lot of people have been, hopefully not in a destructive way, but in a positive way, moderating their stress a little bit with moderate consumption of alcohol.
Yeah, very good call. Stephen Beauchesne, always good to check in with you, and especially comforting to check in with you today. Thank you so much for your time.
Great chatting, Jamie.
Bye for now, sir.
Bye. Say hi to Malcolm for me.
I shall do.